My guest today is Susan Yao, the founder of Vermont Village School in Brattleboro, Vermont. Prior to becoming a Microschool founder, Susan was a progressive educator in private schools, serving as a middle school humanities teacher and middle school head. She has a bachelor's degree in social studies from Harvard College and a master's in educational leadership from Bank Street College. She lives on a homestead in Bellows Falls, Vermont, with her husband and two children. Susan Yao, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks so much for being here. We met at the Harvard Emerging Schooling Models Conference earlier this fall, and I was thrilled to hear about some innovative education happening in Vermont, and really excited to hear about your story founding the Vermont Village School. But I'd love to start, if we could, Susan, with a little bit of your backstory of what got you interested in education and in teaching in kind of the earlier days of your career?
Great, great. I actually come from a family of teachers. My parents met as teachers. So many members of my extended family are teachers, but I did not think of it as a career for myself until I was graduating college. I thought I was interested in politics and how laws can shape um, our realities and try to fix some of the problems we see. And I just found myself not very interested in the policy level because it felt so far removed from the actual changes that they were trying to bring about. And so my college internships went from international to national in DC on the Hill to, local with Boston Mayor Menino. And then ultimately, I ended up in the classroom because I was writing my senior thesis on college admissions in France.
Hmm.
And um, I was still thought I was studying the policy, but actually I was spending so many hours with high school teachers and students in the classroom and then interviewing college students who had gone through the process. I just found that I loved being in the classroom and that felt very concrete and real to me. And so ultimately I ended up in the classroom as well.
Yeah, so then you worked in private independent schools. Tell us about that experience as a teacher.
Well, I got to see a little of everything in the very beginning of my career. I student taught at a vocational school, which I thought was so interesting. I had students in the auto shop, working on teachers' cars.
And that
And
would
then
have been a public vocational school. Is that right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
as a student teacher, right. And then I spent just 1 year in a charter school, which was, in the no excuses, very strict style of charter school that was not a fit for me. And then I ended up in private schools by accident because my teaching license didn't translate to New York State. So I loved the independence and autonomy I had as a classroom teacher in private schools. And I've always worked in K-8 schools, and I just love that mix of ages because the middle schoolers have the younger kids, they can be buddies with each other. The younger kids have older kids to look up to, and it brings out the best in everyone, I think.
I
And
love that.
so
Yeah.
I really liked the cozy feeling of a small private school.
Yeah. And so then what happened next?
Then I had always had the idea in the back of my head to start a school, and I had
Hmm.
started to talking to a Bank Street classmate about it. A lot of school founders are Bank Street classmates. Um,
Can I just pause there for a
yeah,
moment, Susan, and ask you, where did this desire come from? You said you had always thought you wanted to open a school. Why was that in those early days?
I would say most teachers have these moments where they think, well, gee, what if I didn't need to convince someone that this was the right thing to do? Or what
Hmm.
if we could just start from scratch and change whatever my source of frustration is, I found that most teachers have a few things they would like to redesign. And
Yeah.
so instead of retrofitting, I think my personality is really suited to building things that are new and not navigating an established bureaucracy in order to do what I think is right and waiting. There's so much waiting because schools change very slowly. And so I had all different ideas for what I would change about a school, and there are just huge groups of people who are not served well by schools, neurodivergent students. I've seen, well, I myself was a kid of color who did not find a lot of mirrors in the school where I was. And so I think many kids who are different in some way are not having a great experience at school. Um, and they're, students who would be considered gifted. There are so many students who just need something different than what an established one size fits all school can offer.
Yeah, sort of to hone in on that point a little bit more, something different than a traditional classroom, either a traditional public or, in your case, a traditional private school classroom.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
that kind of conventional model of schooling doesn't work well for every student, and or is something that families want alternatives to often. So. Okay, so you started to have this idea of launching your own school. What happened then?
Well, at the time, I thought you needed $1 million to start a school, and I didn't
Mm.
have $1 million. And so it was just on the back burner. And I decided to become a middle school head and get a feel for leading an established school first and see where that led me. And I really enjoyed being a middle school head and having that sort of influence over what happens in the day to day. And there were still things that I wanted to change more quickly. And even as a middle school head, um, there might be bureaucracy to navigate, or there are other people who will stop a project or slow down something, even when they agree with what it is. And so COVID was what finally led me to just make the leap and try to start a school. And I think it was a catalyst for so many people. For me, it opened up the market because every single family had to try something different. They had to try some version of virtual homeschooling. Um, and so a good number of them realized they could thrive outside of school. And maybe they finally realized they weren't even thriving at school and they needed something different. And then I saw all of these micro schools popping up on shoestring budgets. And it didn't take $1 million anymore. And so, and especially, I was very interested in self directed centers because they could open with very few staff. They're self-directed, so you don't have the pressure of recreating all of the subjects for all of the kids, or trying to hire that many teachers at once. And the tuition they were charging was very affordable for middle class families. And so that's where I saw a pathway finally to really starting a school, and um, had so many more reasons to want to reimagine school during COVID because I was ready to be completely creative, change the schedule, and just meet the needs of the moment. We moved all of our classrooms outside for that fall, and that was really cool. We built furniture together and had all of these new outdoor classrooms. And I was ready to just keep doing more of that.
And this was in Vermont at the time?
This was in Massachusetts at the time. We had
Okay.
left New York City. As soon as we had kids, we left
Okay.
New York City. And so I was a middle school head in Massachusetts in Dartmouth. And then
Great.
when I decided to start a school, that's when we moved to Vermont.
I see. So when you were saying that you were outside, that was when you were a middle school head.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
In
Okay.
Massachusetts.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then post pandemic or kind of, during the pandemic, you made the shift. From Massachusetts to a DIY homestead in Bellows Falls, Vermont, and decided then to launch your microschool, Vermont Village School. So tell us a little bit about what was going through your mind in those sort of early days of resettling in Vermont and thinking about launching your school.
It was terrifying at first, honestly. Um, as someone, I had always been a student who was good at school and chasing the next milestone. And so that was always a stable full-time job. That was always a very important, piece of adult success to me. And so leaving a stable full-time job where I had, become a respected administrator, that was terrifying. And so my first year was researching. I visited a number of micro schools, got, talking to founders, and I also needed to line up part-time income for myself during that research phase. So
Hmm.
I was doing some consulting. I had a little farmer's market stand, which I found is a great use of, it's a great way to use my hands, and it balances out, what the parts of my brain I use for education. So, it was terrifying, but I think once I met my school partner, things really fell into place. And it was advice I had gotten early on. You probably know Ken Danforth
Oh, yes.
from
Ken
North
Danford
Star.
at
Yeah.
North
I think he
Star.
was the one who said, don't do it alone.
Mm.
They advise a lot of founders.
Yeah.
And
So are you part of the Liberated Learners Network then, Susan? Or
Not officially, but we
okay,
are neighbors, actually. We're just half an hour away from each other, and we brought our
got it.
kids to visit North Star, and get some ideas for our micro school, or maybe even, team up sometimes.
Yeah.
We're not officially in their network, but that was really important advice because during that year, the classmate I mentioned from Bank Street had been a really good thought partner, but she is in Brooklyn, still lives in Brooklyn, and so she wasn't going to be the one to open something with me in person. And so it was at a farm. I was just starting to say out loud, I'm interested in starting a school. I was almost afraid to say it, but I said it out loud. And then someone else said, oh, I am interested in starting a school. And that's when things really started moving. Because after a
Wow.
year of research, I had to decide I'm either doing this or not doing it. So
Incredible. And what year was that? That was 2022-ish?
good question. Yeah, it must have been around 2022. We've been open 3 years.
Okay.
So we ran a pilot program together. And I had been starting to do experimental classes with homeschool communities too, offering a cooking class or offering, a STEM morning at the library, just getting a feel for what
Mm,
people responded to and what different homeschool markets looked like.
mm. Okay. And so what was that pilot phase like?
Um, It was, there's a book called Build the Dang Thing. And I bought it because the title really spoke to where I was in that moment of, okay, I need to really build it now. And in the corporate world, there's something called minimal viable product. And so for a school, it's really hard to make a small version of a school to test out because after school is not the same, summer camp is not the same, Saturday school is not the same as a school. And so I think it's great to have homeschoolers come on a weekday and try out a full day program. So it was 4 Tuesdays. We rented a Quaker meeting house, and it was pretty self directed at that point, and it was open to all ages because we really didn't have a target age range at that point.
Mm,
And it was a great way to just get our feet wet.
mm,
Um, we had a small grant from the Abolitionist Teaching Network that funded the pilot. And so from there, we mostly found out what we did not want. And I think that's so useful too.
mm. Like what?
Because, so, when thinking about ages, we found that really young kids were, so I've been a middle school educator. My school partner was a high school special education teacher. And so the 5 to 8 range was not the best fit for us. And they also, there's something about age 8 where kids are wanting more structure. And that's when a lot of homeschoolers hit a wall too, because they want more of a learning community if they don't have one already. And the parents might feel like, well, gee, my kid needs, something else.
Mm,
Um, and so we found 8 was actually a good minimum age for us based on that pilot. And, having multiple 5-year olds is adorable. They had a lot of fun, but it wasn't what we wanted to build.
yeah. And were your children, I know you have two children, Susan, were your children part of this? Have they been with you from the beginning?
They have, yeah. Yeah, my
Yeah.
school partner calls them middle management because they end up involved in a lot of decisions that shape the school. And
Yeah.
they are 9 and 11 now. So I think it has been mostly pros when you start a school with your own children, but it can definitely be complicated to be in the
Yeah.
same tiny one room schoolhouse together.
Yeah. And so tell us about, give us a sort of a snapshot of the school now. How many students are you serving? What are their age ranges at the moment? Yeah, give us a little bit of the sense of what it's like now at Vermont Village School.
Sure, sure. We have 6 kids between the ages of 9 and 12. And it really took us 2 years to build the right cohort for our program. Um, and so that's a really nice size for us. It's basically, one auntie and a van. Because the village is our classroom. So we are doing field trips or having guests come to us. Yesterday we were at a sewing studio in Brattleboro, and also volunteering at Foodworks, which is a food pantry. So we found that to be a really good cohort size for us because we travel so much,
Mm.
and a good age range for us too.
And is it 4 days a week, 5 days a week? What is that structure like?
It is 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 9 to 3. So a pretty typical full day.
Okay. And so 6 students, are you planning now that you have your model kind of down pat to expand? I know you said you like the kind of small size due to the travel and community immersion, but what does the future look like?
I would love to expand, and there are a couple of different ways I see us expanding. I think we do need to grow by one van load at a time.
Yeah.
So if we added a younger cohort, and maybe we would hire someone who could work with a younger cohort, um, we would want that to be, up to 6 kids as well. If they're under 8 years old, or as our kids age out of the program, we may have another upper elementary age cohort coming. I could also see us being in different regions of Vermont. I've met so many
Hmm.
families all over Vermont. There's one family who is commuting from Burlington, which is
Wow.
the other side of the state. And they would
And
get a hotel. They would drive 2 hours and or more than 2 hours and get a hotel. And I think there are families all over the state who would sign up for the village if we had more locations. And each location would need to be, you know, clusters of 6 or 7 kids.
so clearly there's demand for what you're offering, and families are willing to go to great lengths for their students to be a part of it. What do you think is attracting families to the Vermont Village School model?
I have visited so many interesting alternative high schools, and it is so cool what they do. They have apprenticeship set up and, project-based learning, portfolios, and very few of those ideas I see in middle school or upper elementary school. And so we are very unusual in that we're an alternative school. We sort of do apprenticeships for that young age, 9 to 13,
Hmm.
because we come with an adult who can help bridge, the experts, right, the professional sewers skills with, um, the young ages of our kiddos. We're there to facilitate apprenticeships in a way, and that's a lot
Yeah.
of what we do.
Huh. And is everyone considered a homeschooler? You're not a recognized private school?
We are not. We decided to go the homeschool route.
Yeah. Yeah, to provide kind of that curriculum flexibility, I would imagine. You've
Hmm.
described the Vermont Village School as a cross between mutual aid and school. And I think you've given us a little bit of a sense of that in terms of, food pantries and volunteering and community immersion. Maybe you could share a little bit more about kind of the curriculum approach and what those 3 days entail.
Hmm. We find that if you reimagine one institution, you have to start reimagining all of the connected institutions. And
Mm,
so we could just focus on education, but then you have questions about housing or, families. Vermont, some people in Vermont are moving towards a 4-day work week. And I think that goes side by side with schools that are not 5 days a week,
Mm,
that allow you flexibility or more choice with your week.
mm,
Um, and so we became interested in other issues and just if we're teaching children to meet authentic needs in the community, then we have to be in touch with what those needs are. And so that's why we are volunteering at farms and food banks. And if we see a need, we will fill it. We don't have strict rules about what, can be a village project or not.
yeah. So you're also planting seeds with educators in traditional schools and school systems through conferences, consulting work. Tell us a bit more about that and maybe your impression of how traditional schools could evolve to incorporate some of the educational philosophy that you've brought into the Vermont Village School.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. We never wanted to be, an experiment off on our own, doing our own thing. Um, and there are so many ways that established schools could be um, reimagined. I think what has arisen for us as, one avenue where I think schools are more likely to adopt what we do is place-based learning, making real connections in the community and not just going on a field trip once a year or volunteering occasionally, but really making it a regular part of what you do. I think a lot of schools have that flexibility. The school where I was a middle school head was we had a weekly service period, and I think that's a great start. Once a week is more than a lot of schools do. Um, the, if you look at the school day, you might talk about community for a few minutes during advisory, or do a social emotional learning activity for a few minutes, and then you spend most of the day just doing your own individual work in class in the same room. And so if we spend more of our physical time out in the community, that's going to just um, ripple out in so
Mm,
many ways.
mm, I love that.
Yeah.
So, as we begin to wrap up, Susan, I'd love to hear your reflection on what it's like to be a founder, kind of moving from that classroom teacher experience to now running the school that you imagined many years ago. What has it been like to be an education entrepreneur?
It has been really fun and exciting. And the finances are sometimes a little too exciting for my taste. But it is such a great feeling to be able to create the type of education that you want as an educator, as a parent, and to have other people who are on board with the vision and open to trying something new together. That has really been an amazing journey.
So, what advice would you give to other prospective founders, maybe current classroom teachers considering following in your footsteps, or other entrepreneurial parents who maybe want to build the kind of school that they dream of? What advice do you have for them?
Some advice I got early on was that I think it's easy to be intimidated by starting a school if you think about the budget or just the massive size of most established schools. Don't try to recreate that. And certainly your first year will not look anything like that. Many of those 200-person schools started out as 10 kids in a garage.
Hmm.
And at its core, a learning community is a group of kids with at least one adult who is there in some sort of guide facilitator role. And I think if you can boil it down to that and remember, then anyone can create that, right? If you have your own kids, you find a few kids, you can start a school.
I love that. Just do it, right? And your point about starting with an MVP, minimum viable product, just getting your name out there, seeing what works, and more importantly, what doesn't work for you. I think that was tremendously helpful advice. And also having a partner, startup partner, can be really valuable as well. Well, this is so exciting, Susan, and I'm excited to watch your journey unfold and hopefully new locations of the Vermont Village School throughout the state of Vermont. If folks want to get connected with you, follow your progress, what is the best way for them to do that?
Sure. We have a website, vermontvillageschool.org, and you can email us through there, or we have a page called Visit the Village if you want to come visit us.
Oh, amazing. Oh, well, that's a wonderful invitation. I hope folks will take you up on that. Susan Yao, best wishes to you, and thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.